oftentimes we feel like, oh, what are people going to say, about our choices and what we're doing in life? There's sometimes you place a lot of value in external opinions and stuff. But what I found with this is like, when you take a chance, people will support you. People you don't even know, will get behind you. And I just remember, like, I didn't really tell many people I was doing the race, because I don't know, like, it was just for me, one, but number two, like, if I fall flat on my face and fail, like, no harm, like, nobody really knew what I was up to. And then throughout the course of the race, like, I was, posting on social media and stuff and stories and just kind of like telling people, and people were like aware of what I was doing and stuff. And then just the overwhelming amount of beautiful messages and support and kindness. Like, I was so moved and touched by that because I'd never really experienced that in my, in my adult life. Like, just all of these people kind of behind you, So that was a really, beautiful kind of learning that, people want what's best for you. People want to see other people succeed. I think there's a lot of goodwill in the world, and sometimes we get focused on, people not wanting us to succeed or thinking that they don't. But I think overwhelmingly, like, people are good, inherently good.
Dawn.
Hi.
Welcome to the Superhuman Switch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
It's always a pleasure to have someone who has already a podcast. And I still remember when we met the first time in that conference.
Yes.
And actually, we wanted to book this. And
for a while. Well, congrats on all your success with your podcast.
Thank you very much. Same to you. We'll jump into it in details.
Yes.
But first, Dawn, I would really interested to know who's Dawn behind this mic.
Oh, that's a really, I guess, complex question, right? Like, who are any of us? Who am I? I am someone who is constantly learning more about herself and other people. Someone who wants to do good in the world, and leave a positive impact, for the people that I come into contact with, and hopefully through our platform, the Mettleset, with a lot of people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I now know you through the podcast, the Medalist. However, before that, you had a long career in the communication and PR.
I did.
Yeah, which is...
I still do to a degree, yeah.
Okay. So take me through your career and the journey that you went through, because you have an abundance of experience in that space.
Yeah, so, I mean, my career is... I feel like it was me just always following my interests. So I'm originally Canadian. I am still Canadian, but I haven't lived there. I have no other passport, so I'm Canadian. But I went to university and studied politics, actually, and thought for a long time that I wanted to enter politics. But then through the course of studying politics, decided that it wasn't necessarily for me. I also worked in politics prior to going to university, and during university I worked for the Ontario legislature. So had kind of a front row seat to what being a political staffer entailed, and through the course of school decided maybe this isn't what I wanted to do. I was always just very curious about lots of different things, and I think... looking back, public relations seemed like it was quite glamorous and, interesting and varied and diverse. So I had my mind set on going into public relations. But, Canada at that time and living in Toronto, it was very, very difficult to get a job. I remember going for, one of these open houses at one of the big agencies, and there was about 50 people.
Applicants.
Yeah, like me, all these bright-eyed young people just finished school, all trying to like jockey to make an impression. And I was just like, whoa, this is a bit, I don't know, like I wasn't expecting this. I thought it would be easy. You get a degree, you go get a job. And then I guess from there, I say I had a quarter-life crisis.
Okay, too soon.
Yeah, too soon. But I was just looking around. I'm not originally from Ontario, from Toronto, where I went to university.
Okay.
And I was just looking around and I was like, is this it? Is this kind of my life? I get a job now and, a full-time job because I was working part-time still for the government.
Yeah.
Do I get a full-time job? Do I just continue on, get married, have kids? Like, is this it? And I just thought there was always something, I don't know, else out there. So I remember it really vividly. I was bawling my eyes out one night and I was like, I don't want to live here. I don't want to have this life. This isn't for me. I'm going to go to Japan. From my mom.
Okay, from Canada to Japan.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to go to Japan. And 2 months later, I was in Japan. I sold everything that I had, like a bunch of IKEA furniture, and packed up. I got a job teaching English. So I went initially to Japan to teach English. And when I was there, had lots of ups and downs in this English teaching.
New environment. This is not a new environment. It's like a totally different environment.
Yeah, and you know what? University, I felt like really threw me for a loop.
Okay.
When I went in, 18, I thought I knew everything. And then when I left university, I was like, I don't know anything.
We all fall in this trap.
Yeah, I was like, I really know nothing.
Yeah.
And just really hit my confidence as well, I guess, and I wanted to go somewhere that was so completely different to challenge myself again. So Japan I was teaching English over there. That was a very interesting time. I went over with this big school called Nova, and if anyone wants to Google it, they can see what happened with Nova about 6-7 months after I arrived in Japan, because the whole thing went bust. It was like this whole fraudulent. What? Yeah, I left that. I had left at that point.
Okay.
Like I went over there initially, and I was like, something is up with this company. Like It's a bit, I don't know.
Fishy.
Well, it's a bit. I felt like they were taking advantage of young people's lack of knowledge about what it is like to work in Japan, and kind of treating people in such a way that I thought wasn't good business practice anywhere, I just knew something was off with this company.
Okay.
And then so I left and went to another company that had me working in a Japanese junior high school, which I loved because I was working with kids. I wasn't teaching adults English. Children were super fun. It was super funny, like just a really, nice period. Working with them, and then Nova went bust.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't thought about this in so long, but if you Google it, I was like, I knew something was up with that company, and left a whole bunch of young people stranded.
Wow.
They're without salaries, without places to live, because
Okay.
they were in school accommodation or staff, staff accommodation, all this kind of stuff. So I was really happy I kind of saw that something was up with this place. And then from there, I saw an ad in a newspaper for an account executive for an advertising company, and I applied and somehow talked my way into that role.
Also in Japan.
Also in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was working for a company that was owned by a European guy that had been in Japan for 20 years. And I did that for about a year, and I worked on some really, really big name brands in public relations, working on their events, working, with a, really multinational team, and it was just super interesting. So that kind of set off my career in public relations. Oh God, we're going into a long story. But from there, I moved to Australia.
I love it. It's like intercontinental. So.
Yeah, from there, I moved to Australia because Japan is one of these places, if you find you're there past a couple of years, you'll be there 20 years.
Yeah, you're right, by the way.
Yeah, and I was just like, I need to leave this market to get international experience.
You fall in love with the culture and the whole.
Yeah, and I loved it. Japan was such a magical time of my life that, sometimes you just really need to know when that time is up and what's next, when, there should be a new chapter, right? Fair enough. If I look back, Japan was one of the best times of my life, but that was a place and time, and I need to recognize that was, I couldn't replicate that ever again.
I love these stories because all the teens who moves from their own home environment and totally different culture, I think this is what shapes you as from a personality and your
Yeah.
skill sets, especially with the Southeast or the East culture.
Yeah.
Is quite tough compared to the West.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was like, you know, God, coming up on 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was no Google Translate on your phone.
Exactly.
What, like, I remember, like, I don't think iPhones existed then.
Yeah,
like,
20 years, no.
Yeah, and the Japanese phones were quite, like, you know, they were really advanced compared to the phones. You know, like I had a Nokia flip phone or something,
Exactly,
you know, in Canada. But in Japan, like I had, you know, internet on my phone and stuff. Like, and you could send, you know.
They're ahead of the curve when they
Yeah.
get to those things.
Yeah. It was so funny. But like back then, yeah, just trying to figure stuff out, figure life out, figure yourself out. It was like really challenging, but it was fun, you know.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, there was moments like around, I don't know, 3 weeks in, like, and it's kind of, I remember reading something about it. It's well known. Like, you kind of have the realization that, wow, you're really here, and, you know, all the newness wears off. Yeah, it sinks in. You kind of have a moment. But beyond that, like, beyond that period, there was, you know, met lots of really cool people who I'm still in touch with. And, yeah, it was just a magical time, really.
Love it. Australia,
yeah. I moved there probably 2008, and that was right around the time. Well, first of all, I landed there and then promptly broke my knee.
Okay.
Which was super. It was probably one of the most challenging times of my life, being in a new country, not really knowing many people, and being immobile, like having your leg in a full brace. And everyone's like, oh, were you out partying? And I was like, no, I was literally running to work in high heels because I hadn't worn high heels for like 2 years in Japan. Exactly. I was like really excited to wear high heels, and I ran and fell over. Australia was a very difficult time to start with because of that injury. And it was 2008. And I got a job at a big global PR agency working on a big UAE brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know where the UAE was at that point.
Okay.
I had to look it up on a map. And did that for about 3 years. I was working on some other UAE brands, travel and tourism brands, and made the decision to move to the UAE. So that was 11 years ago that I did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are considered veteran now. And
yeah.
You considered the 10 years in the UAE.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I feel, well, 12, is it 10? 11? 12 years. It'll be coming up on 12, yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's shift the gear a little bit and your cycling career, I would say.
Career.
Yeah.
I'm not sponsored.
Yet. But at the point, I went through some of your achievements, and they are really inspiring.
Yeah.
Considering that you took like 3 weeks to jump into 3 months.
3 months.
3 months to jump into like a big, massive race.
Ultra cycling, yeah.
Yeah, it's so take me through the journey, because this is where I know you now because of the cycling.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? Late 2018, I was spending the summer in France and had, you know, met a friend there who had just done the transcontinental race, which is like a 4,000 kilometer across Europe race. And he was just kind of, I don't know, jubilant, like really on cloud nine, really skinny, weird tan lines, talking about being chased by dogs, talking about sleeping in playgrounds. The hardest, best thing he's ever done in his life was this transcontinental race, and it was his first ultra. And at that period, I was going through a bit of a change in my personal life, and you know, at this point, was living in the UAE here in Dubai, and had my own company, consultancy, and just felt like I wanted to challenge myself in a new way. Physically, I'd never really done that, you know, taking on a big physical challenge. And anyone who knows me, you know, knows that I always like being fit and working out and stuff like that. But I was always like the worst, like my CrossFit class. Like the coaches would be like, "You can lift heavier." I'm like, "I know, but I don't want to."
My choice.
Like, yeah, burpees are like the worst. I'm like, "Do I have to?" Like, I was just like, you know, I just didn't love it. Like, I liked being fit. I liked going to catch up with people and stuff, but like, it just wasn't anything that I really cared about advancing in, you know, and running was fine, but I was just like, yeah, 10K is my max. Like, I don't have no interest.
After 10, I'm bored.
Yeah, I just like running a marathon. I was just like, why? You know, I don't, no interest in it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do something big physically. And I just, you know, we were at a barbecue one night and he was talking about the race. And I couldn't even like, you know, it's hard to kind of fathom 4,000 kilometers, you know, and I think he had done it in like less than 14 days.
Okay.
And I just couldn't really, you know, I don't know, it's hard to imagine. But I was just like, do you think I could do something like that? And he was like, of course you could if you train. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do one. I'm going to do the Transcontinental. And I mean, so that was probably late August. And then got back here and kind of, you know, faffed about for a bit, like just getting into a routine with work and going to CrossFit and being bad at CrossFit and, you know, whatever. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this race. It was happening the next summer, so I felt like I had a lot of time. But then, you know, a few months passed and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, I suppose I should think about getting a bike. And as it transpired, I had signed up for the Transcontinental, and then someone told me about a shorter race called Biking Man Oman.
Okay.
That was happening end of February. It was a good training race. And then, which was 1,000 kilometers. So I was like, yeah, cool, let's do that. And what happened was when I put in my application for the Transcontinental, I hit like enter and then closed the computer, but it didn't go through.
Okay.
So when everybody got their applications, acceptance for the race, I didn't get an email, and I emailed them, and they were like, "It looks like you didn't put in an application." I was like, "I filled it out. Like I spent, you know, like a long time filling it out because it wasn't just put your name. Like they wanted to get a sense of who you are.
Like a lottery and all the
Well,
details.
it's a sense of like your problem, you know, solving skills and stuff like that, and if you're going to be a good fit and successful in the race and stuff like that. Okay. So I didn't even have a bike when I signed up for that, and at the same time I signed up for Biking Man Oman, I didn't have a bike either. And so I signed up for both of those, and then I didn't get my Transcontinental, acceptance, and I was just like, okay, I'm signed up for Biking Man Oman though, but I'm not going to do the Transcontinental. Biking Man Oman's coming up really, really, really soon. Yeah. So I got a bike and then just really started to train really.
At last, you invested in something.
Yeah. I got the bike. Like, it was, I think, less than 3 months before the race.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it was about 2.5 months before the race. But I've been training on like a rental bike.
Okay.
Like doing the 50-kilometer loop.
Fair enough.
A little bit.
Yeah. I think it's a decision that you made, put you on this trajectory. So why not? The training itself, I think it's when you bought the bike, when you put the program, take me through the process of like preparing yourself to such a race, because you've never been in a big race like this.
Yeah, I mean, try just looking back now on it, like Chris, my friend who had done the TCR, the Transcontinental, he was very, very helpful. And I just had blinders on, focused solely on this race. So every weekend I was up in Al Qudra, and, Chris kind of said to me, he's like, if you can do 50K, you can do 70. If you can do 70, you can do 100. If you can do 100, you can do 200. Cool. So I just kind of built up my distances that way, like one weekend I did 50-50, on each day. The next was 70-70, and then kind of built up. And, before you know it, in January, I think towards the end of the month or early February, because the race was the end of February, I did Jebel Jais twice, which was about, 140 kilometers plus 2,400 meters, 2,500 meters at the time, because it wasn't right to the top. And then the next day did 200 kilometers out at Al Qudra, which is pretty flat for anyone who doesn't know. And that was crazy distance. Now I look back, I'm like, ew, that's training, yuck, because I've done it so many times now. But like when I first did it, I was like, I felt it gave me the confidence to feel like I could do the race because it kind of replicated what you would experience during a race. So did the physical training, probably overtrained, to be honest, and then just kind of absorbed all the information I could, through social media, other people doing the race, asking lots of questions. I met the guy, Neil, who would eventually be my coach, at a talk at Wolfie's bike shop here. Okay. They were doing a talk about ultra distance, and that helped me, kind of get a perspective. But I did so many things wrong, like so many. And I feel like there was a lot of luck involved in the first. Like, obviously there was a lot of preparation, but I mean, I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? So there was a lot of luck that things didn't go wrong.
Why you consider that there is a luck factor then?
I mean, I think there is an element of luck and serendipity and everything, we do, right place, right time, that kind of thing. But I just felt really, a lot of it, like I said, was down to preparation. But there's a lot of things that could go wrong that are completely out of your control, like weather or mechanical issues with the bike that nobody could anticipate despite having, service and stuff like that. And
especially that there is no support team.
Yeah, there's no support. It's completely self-supported. So lucky, that I had a relatively straightforward, again, no weather. People on the race, in the middle of this race in Biking Man Oman, not in the middle, towards the end, I was towards the back of the race, but people in the middle got caught in a really vicious sandstorm. I avoided all of that. Luck, right? Yeah, it's just luck. So, I think, luck kind of plays a factor in all of our lives, but it's what you do with the opportunities that come your way, or how you act, how you deal with the adversity. So there was, elements of adversity, but I just dealt with them.
Interesting. Yeah. And this race, when you decided to sign up for Oman race and you prepared for it and you went through the race, what are the key learning that you took? Of course, luck, I think it's a very good point, but what else you learned from such an experience?
What else did I learn? I think you're far more capable of things than you realize, and it's all about just taking a chance on yourself sometimes, even though people might say you're crazy. And I had, because I wasn't doing the Transcontinental, I signed up for this race and I was like, why am I even doing this? Because this was supposed to be, quote unquote practice. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go on this race. I'm going to, I don't know if I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a fool, And one of my friends, Dan, I messaged, was just messaging him about the race. And he goes, what's the harm in just going to the start line and just riding your bike? And I was just like, nothing really, there's no harm in just trying. So I tried, and I remember that morning, the first day of the race, around 60 kilometers in, I was like, I'm an ultra cyclist.
That's a good mindset, by the way.
Yeah, I was like, I am doing this. I am an ultra cyclist, and then a little further up the road, I had run into, this Omani town at rush hour in the morning, and had to get off my bike to cross the road because I was so afraid. Because I wasn't used to riding. This was probably the first time I'd ever really ridden on the road.
It is the first time.
Yeah, it was because I'd never, here you have cycle tracks and dedicated cycle tracks, and then Jebel Jais is kind of the only time I was really riding on the road before. Okay. So this was the first time I was really out on the road riding my bike, was in this race.
Okay.
So, but I just kind of took a chance on myself. Related to Dan kind of encouraging me, another really beautiful learning is that, oftentimes we feel like, oh, what are people going to say, about our choices and what we're doing in life? Mm-hmm. There's sometimes you place a lot of value in external opinions and stuff. But what I found with this is when you take a chance, people will support you. People you don't even know, will get behind you. And I just remember, I didn't really tell many people I was doing the race, because I don't know, it was just for me, one. But number two, if I fall flat on my face and fail, no harm, nobody really knew what I was up to. Cool. And then throughout the course of the race, I was, posting on social media and stuff and stories and just kind of telling people, and people were aware of what I was doing and stuff. And then just the overwhelming amount of beautiful messages and support and kindness. Like, I was so moved and touched by that because I'd never really experienced that in my, like in my adult life, like just all of these people kind of behind you, So that was a really, beautiful kind of learning that, people want what's best for you. People want to see other people succeed. I think there's a lot of goodwill in the world, and sometimes we get focused on, people not wanting us to succeed or thinking that they don't. But I think overwhelmingly, like, people are good, inherently good.
It's really inspiring because you went through the experience with zero expectation from anyone, and this is the outcome of it, which is really like you're overwhelmed with the people that they reach out to you, and they are basically inspired by what you've done.
Yeah.
Do you think that this will give you a fuel to do another crazy stuff like
Well,
this?
it did. Like, I mean, it did right after, like, I finished that race, and I was just so, like, overwhelmed because I think people had kind of, within the race, I know people were learning that I only had bought the bike 3 months before and were really kind of taken by that. And I just, for me, I didn't really get the gravity of, I was just like,
what to expect.
Yeah, what to expect, or like what that meant for people, because some people had trained a long time for this, or, people who have been cyclists for many, many years would be, hesitant to try an ultra and stuff like that.
True.
So, I mean, I just did what I wanted to do. I didn't really realize, that would affect anyone or inspire anyone or whatever. But, the whole experience of the race, though, like, just the adventure of it, I think, rather than, people's kind of external validation or anything, that's what kind of inspired me to sign up for the next race right away. So once I finished that race, it was like on to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Like they become a bit addictive, these races.
That's true. It's always there is a psychological study says that whoever has a high achiever achieves something, that there is always another summit to achieve.
Yeah.
Which becomes like you have to be aware, because sometimes you fall into the trap and you like you have a depression that there is nothing.
There's nothing on the horizon
to do, which is really scary.
Yeah.
Moving to this, and I really the fact that when we talked before about the podcast, the Medalist podcast, and I really like the fact that you introduced the idea, and I think you were inspired by this because of the community that reached out to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of things that all came together to kind of really, like, the Mettleset was born out of. But one of them absolutely is, the ultra endurance sports scene. I think, for me, like I say this, like I'm a nobody, an inexperienced cyclist who did this thing and found a real community of people who were supportive and kind and helpful. And I think, looking back on some other sports, I maybe felt a bit excluded, whether rightly or wrongly. That's my own, it was a Dawn issue, feeling excluded, or an external kind of, it wasn't a welcoming community. I think probably a bit of a mixture of both.
Okay.
But I felt quite excluded, but I never felt that with the ultra community. So there was that kind of, looking at this growing segment of types of sports. So there's ultra running, there's, open water swimming, long distance, there's ultra cycling, which is, booming since that time. Like, it's just grown massively. There's so many new races in all different parts of the world. So I got really interested in that kind of whole ecosystem, the mindset, the what it takes to train, the different types of personalities who do these races, because I think that's one of the beautiful things, like, I found in ultra is that, you have an idea of what an athlete looks like or how they behave or whatever, and you just get such a diverse mixed bag of people, in these races who do them, who complete them in many, many different ways. The right way is the way that works, right? And that could be any number of ways.
Exactly.
So I got really inspired by that. And then looking at, people interested in my own story, as well, which I found quite, strange, because I would always be working in communications. I was on the other side of that like
The
pitching,
corporate side.
well, pitching other people to media,
Yeah.
not myself, but I was just like, why are you interested in me? But getting press through no, outward effort on my own, because I like, I know we're speaking on this podcast now, but like generally I don't really, like to put myself out there that much. But through no effort of my own, getting all this press, ending up in like Red Bull magazine in France. Like if you had looked like, back 10 years ago, you're going to be in Red Bull magazine for something athletic, I'd be like, you're crazy. Yeah. So I just saw there was an interest in this, in this space. Yeah. And people like me as well, who maybe aren't elite athletes. And then couple that with the work I was doing at the time, or for the past 10 years really, in sports communications, and just seeing, how the media treated sports and how they shared sports stories was very one-dimensional for a long time.
That's true.
It was like race report or match report, and sports culture is so much richer than that, than what happens on the field or on the racetrack or, within a race.
At least for the public, because also they are doing sport. So
yeah, and
it's not resonating with them.
There's so many different types of stories to share. So I got really interested kind of in sports in general. And some of the sports that I was working on, I had a bit of a niche with action sports. Okay. And media didn't really know how to treat those sports. Like it's not cricket, it's not football. Like, how do you kind of write about, someone competing in, I don't know, like OCR
it's
or...
It's not a big fan base.
Yeah, it wasn't a big fan base at the time, but I think it had a fan base, but the media hadn't responded to that, yet, or didn't know how to treat those types of stories. And then in particular, like one of the things that I loved working on was women's sports, because I just find... because I'm a woman and, just inherently interested in the stories of other women. And just being really, I guess, disappointed in the media's lack of attention and care for women in sports. Elite level athletes not getting the attention that they deserve through traditional media channels. Okay. And I just saw there was a big disconnect because people are interested, but there was no platform really for them to go to find out more information.
To listen to stories, to be inspired.
Yeah, to be inspired and just learn more about these athletes. And then just looking at women's sports in particular, like the whole ecosystem, the prize purse for the women's professional sports events, a lot less than the men's.
There's a big debate around
this. And there's a big disconnect. But I'm like, it's tied to media coverage as well, and why isn't there media coverage? Well, who's writing about these stories? It's one type of journalist. There's like, I think at the time I was trying to think like this one point I was working on a women's golf event, but I was just thinking more deeply about the sports media ecosystem here. And I was just like, do I know any sports journalists who are women? I was like, one in the country. That's what I could identify, just one. And I was just like, yeah, there just needs to be more attention on women's sports. And, the interest is there. There's just not the platform. So the Mettleset is kind of like a combination of all of these experiences put together, just looking at, a bigger opportunity to share these types of stories. I think also, and, we were chatting just before, I think, I think the adventure and ultra communities, like in terms of sports, are a lot more welcoming and accessible to people who might not think sports are for them either. Like, I think, which is kind of the disconnect because there's like crazy feats, and like ultra running and stuff. But I can't tell you how many, like ultra runners I know that have skipped the short races and just gone to like, the 100-kilometer races and stuff. I think it's just... they're different types of sports, and I think they're far more welcoming for people who might have felt excluded from other sports. Yeah.
For the podcast itself, Medalist podcast, what is your plan as the impact? What do you expect as an impact on not only the region, because I saw a really potential not on the regional level, but even on a global level?
Yeah, I mean, there's other, brands, media brands and platforms that exist in other markets that I wouldn't say they're directly like ours, but they focus on women's sports. I think, ours is a bit unique because we focus on women's sports and other underreported sports like
That's
action and endurance and motorsport and those types of things. But I think the potential is massive. Like we've existed for less than a year now. We have listeners, I just checked this morning, 94 countries. Number one across 14 countries. We're globally ranked, as top 0.3 podcasts on Apple Podcasts, which, we knew the interest was there. So I think, for us, it's really about celebrating and giving a platform to people who might not have had their stories shared, athletes that might not have had their stories shared earlier, and, giving them, again, that platform to share their stories, to share their thoughts, to share their wins, their triumphs, on a practical level too. A lot of these women and guys too need sponsors, right? So you need to show ROI to your sponsors, and we want to help with that. We always ask all of our athletes on if there's sponsors they want to give a shout out to, because brands that support women in sports or other underrepresented athletes deserve to have that recognition that they're supporting them. So we always do that. I think the impact is to help, I think to challenge other media brands here or other platforms to share those stories. There's an interest there, obviously. I think what I love about our platform too, and the listeners that are all over the world, is that we're shining a light on the Middle East as well for a lot of people who might not, might have a certain view of the Middle East and what happens here.
True.
And sharing the voices of women, in this region. And so they can actually hear direct from them, what their lives are like and what their experiences are like as athletes. I think also showcasing the Middle East is like a really fun sports destination. I think the impact for us is we really want to help diversify the sporting ecosystem here and provide pathways for other people to get involved in sports, support women who are athletes and want to become professional, and support professional athletes as well. So yeah.
It's really inspiring. And again, when I met you, we discussed this, and I was really impressed by the mission behind the whole idea. And we brought even the concept even bigger beyond the podcast itself.
Yeah.
Because people resonate with stories, and this is the reason people reach out to you, because they feel that they're like you and they have no challenge. So how we can set ourselves to such a challenge? If you give one advice to your younger self when you were back in Canada, looking into what you are now, what advice you can give?
I think it's funny that I'll say this because I've been thinking a lot about it, is know when to quit.
Okay.
I think I spent a lot of time in my youth, as a young person working and stuff, in maybe situations that weren't necessarily aligned with what I wanted my life to be like. And did so because I thought that's what you had to do, rather than, what you want to do or what you want your life to look like. So I think I've thought about this a lot. People, I think quitting sometimes gets a bad reputation, oh, you never quit, never give up. And I'm like, no, you should, if it's not working.
That's true.
If something is not working, then move on, know when to, stop and put your effort into something else. And that's not to say, there's a lot of things I was listening to another podcast, and it's don't quit before the magic happens, and I feel like with the Mettleset, that's something I will not quit. That's something I won't give up on, because that aligns with my values. And I feel like I was put on this earth to help people, or I want to anyways. I don't know if it's higher calling, I'm getting all this, but I want to do something positive with my life. And I feel like this is my life's work to help other people get involved in sports and benefit from sport. So I won't quit before the magic happens there, but I spent a lot of time in my youth kind of working on things that I didn't really believe in or that weren't really aligned with my values, that were causing me stress, and I wasn't really well. You know what I mean? Like my life wasn't positive and healthy, and I didn't feel healthy mentally and physically and stuff. Like I should have quit those situations a lot sooner than I did.
There is a nice saying by Seth Godin. He says that winners quit all the time, and they know when and how to quit. And there is nothing wrong with that. We all face this up and down. But it depends on the self-awareness to know exactly when to quit and what to quit.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It is.
We cannot give it like a broad perspective. It's a challenge to see when to quit on a certain thing that it's not serving you.
Yeah. If it's not
aligned
serving
with
you,
your values.
exactly.
It's really important. Talking about your values, and I think what you're doing is obviously it's aligned, and you see that there is a bigger purpose beyond yourself. What tip you can give to a lady in the Middle East? I don't want to like only limit it to the Middle East, but how to define the values that can give you the ammunition or basically the drive to take the right decision and to pick up your proper path.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a lot of trial and error, right? Like I feel like my life, and I'm a work in progress all the time, and I never really sat down and thought about what I care about in life or what I want my life to look like, really, except for the past couple of years that I've really done that. I guess, it's trying many different things. Sometimes you need to be faced with what you absolutely don't want in your life to realize what you do want. So you only find that out sometimes by trying new things. So I would say try many different things, explore many different avenues. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, what an amazing time we live in to have all sorts of resources available to us. Like, even if you don't have, financial resources, you have access to information and, stuff like that. So I would just say try many different things. Like, explore what your interests are. And just try.
Amazing. It's I know it's like trying multiple things to figure out which one that suits you. But what you just lined out is really, really kind of like a strong framework, but it's a challenge for a lot of people around us. What's next for the Medalist now? I'm really interested.
The Mettleset?
Mettleset.
That's okay. What's next for us? I mean, we're continuing to grow the podcast and the audience around that. We're branching into YouTube. We are also hopefully launching our website at the end of this year or later this year. So there's many things happening. I mean, for us, like, we've built the audience over the past year, and it's now, giving back to that community in other ways through other information, events. We've started to do, just by speaking in the media, some, advocacy work. We'd like to expand upon that, events. It's really, the sky is the limit. It's just a matter of we need to prioritize what we can do, what's feasible for us to do without burning ourselves out as well.
Yeah,
because we need cautious. We need to be able to continue, But it's definitely expanding it. We're having conversations with brands now about, sponsoring the podcast. Perfect. And because nothing grows without investment. And we're really excited about where it's going to head.
Awesome. Big shout out to you guys. I'm really impressed. And again, we covered this point and we discussed it several times. I really like the mission, and I wish you all the best. Where people can find you guys? It's just to...
Yeah, so I mean, you can find us on any platform, like any podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, at the Mettleset, and then on Instagram at the Mettleset as well. The Mettleset.com, which is just a holder page right now, but you can put in your email and find a link to the podcast. So yeah, that's kind of the two key places where we're at.
Awesome. I'll make sure that they are in the show notes. So
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
It's long waited, but it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Here.